Hello, my most amazing artists. Today we're going to talk about balance. Balance is one of the principles of art. But before we do, let's review what the elements of art are, shall we? Line, shape, color, baby, color, form, value, texture, and space. Remember, the elements of art are what you need every time that you cook up a marvelous masterpiece. The principles of art are like the sugar and spices that you sprinkle throughout to make your work of art even more awesome. The principle of art that we are going to be focusing on today is balance. There are three kinds of balance. Symmetrical balance is what you see when you look at the butterfly. Symmetrical balance means this: if you take a vertical line and run it down your work of art, or even in nature, as you see with this butterfly, whatever appears on one side of that line of symmetry also appears on the other side, and it would be exactly the same or symmetrical. Now check out the crab. Obviously, he's been doing a lot of weightlifting with one arm, not so much with the other. If we put a line of symmetry down the middle of that picture, it would not be the same on both sides. It would be what's called asymmetrical. And at the bottom is what we will be focusing on today: when lines, shapes, colors, form, value, texture, and space all comes from one center point, that is called radial balance. Let's look at some other examples of radial balance, shall we? This would be an example of an Aztec carving, an Aztec calendar of the sun. And if you look right in the middle at that good-looking guy's face, you will see that all lines and shapes radiate or come from that center point. Another beautiful example of radial balance would be this, what's called a rose window. This is stained glass, and we are looking at this from the inside of a church. All colors and shapes are radiating from that center point. You can find radial balance in architecture, nature, and art. Check out these Tibetan monks who are creating a beautiful mandala, which is an example of radial design, putting bit by bit grains of sand to create this beautiful radial balance design. And one of my favorite artists, Ryan McGinnis, created these amazing glow-in-the-dark radial balance masterpieces. So there you have it. Now let's chat about our radial design. Today you're going to create a radial design. The plate already has a radial design on it. You can see that the design started in the center and radiated or continued out. You can continue making your design radiated by using colors that are the same throughout, or you can do a random pattern where you're just putting your tissue paper squares wherever you want. So let's talk about how to do it so that it's radiating. The first thing you'll want to do, though, is decide, do you want your design popping out or dented in? And here's how you can figure that out. Touch the texture of the plate. If it's popping out and you decide to put your tissue paper on this side, that means when you're finished, it will be the opposite. Your design will be dented in. If you decide to do it on the side that's dented in, which is my favorite, it makes it so that your design, when you take it out, is going to be popping out. So I always like to use this side, but you could try the other side. Before you start, it doesn't really matter where you start, you're going to need to make sure to fill in the entire circle. But before you start, you'll need to add a little bit of this watery glue to where you plan to start. And I'm going to start with just some of the circles. So I'm just brushing a little bit of the glue there. And I think I want to have an alternating pattern of these two colors. I'm just going to take a piece of little tissue square and kind of crumble it up. And if you have two, it's fine. Just gonna set that one aside. I'm gonna set it right there, and I want it to be just in that circle. So I'm gonna squish it down in there and maybe brush a little bit more to kind of get it to stay in place. I'll put one more right there. You have to kind of sandwich the tissue paper with a little bit of glue in between. There we go. That one's going to stay. I've got this one brushed on, and I said I was going to do a pattern. So I'm just gonna crumple this one up, and again, smushing it. My hands are gonna get sticky from the glue. It is art class, that is okay. I see I've got a little blank spot. It always helps to put a couple. That's what's going to really make the color stand out. So I'm just going to put a little bit of tissue paper there. Now to seal those two in place, I have to put a couple layers of tissue paper on top. This time, I'm just gonna put a random color. I'm gonna put pink right over the whole thing and just brush it right on top. And it helps, you can see how translucent or see-through it is. It helps if you really make sure to put a couple of layers. I probably should have brushed glue on the whole thing. There we go. I'm gonna put one pink one there and maybe do another pink one on top, or I could have done a different color. It's totally up to you. And you can see that it immediately wants to go in those grooves. The more you can shove it down inside those grooves, the more 3D your design will be. All right, so I've got that little part done. I'm going to work now on putting some tissue paper on this one. So again, cover the whole thing with glue. Remember, you have to sandwich it. Once that whole thing is covered in glue, then you can put tissue paper on top of that. And just for some variety, I'm gonna use a different color. All right, let me work on this for a couple minutes and then we'll talk some more. All right, so I've gotten a couple more done, and I think I wanna take a break from working on the outside and put some stuff in the middle. So again, cover the whole thing with glue. And I can even lay little pieces of fabric on there. I have this little shiny fabric I want to put in there. And again, your hands are going to get sticky. It is art class. The fabric doesn't always like to stay. So the key is putting a piece of tissue paper over it. So I'm going to take some tissue paper, lay it on top. Remember, tissue paper has to get glue on top. And the more you can push that tissue paper, it's okay if it gets wrinkly, the more you can push it inside those grooves, and I'm just having it do a little tap dance to do that, the more 3D it will be. So make sure you really tap dance and get it in all those little grooves to make it 3D. Now the glue has to completely dry before we can pop it out of these trays, but you want to make sure that you really tap it. Tap dance that tissue paper. If it tears, it's okay, just lay another piece on top. But the more that you tap dance it, the more 3D it's going to be. Now when you feel like you have one layer and the whole thing is covered and there's no black shiny areas, you definitely will want to go back and put another complete 2 or 3 complete layers of tissue paper on top. The more tissue paper you put, the more tap dancing you do, the better that your radial design with texture and color will be. All right, so remember, please make sure to put glue on top of it first. Then put your tissue paper. If you're creating a design, make sure you crumble it a little bit. You can use your paintbrush to shape it and your fingers to get it to stay in place. If you're trying to create a certain color, like I want this to be bright yellow, make sure you use a couple of pieces of tissue paper. Then you need to definitely make sure you put 1, 2, or 3 pieces of tissue paper on top. Remember, the more you tap dance it, the better. All right, by the end of art class, the surface will be covered and we'll let it dry until next time. Let's get started.